So I came up with the idea for this video just probably a few weeks ago. Thought I'd try to make this channel a little bit more interesting than just showing off my music collection. But yeah, this is really exciting for me really to do this because music's been such a huge part of my life, and I've really realized that in recent years, and that's why I started collecting music and spending shit tons of money on it, and it's just worth it to me to have, and will always be a part of me and always be so important to me, and I'm always excited about new music coming out and the experimentation and how music's going to grow into the future. Gives me something to look forward to every year. So yeah, I'm just going to start from like the very beginning. This is going to be, try to keep it as brief as I can, mostly go over some stuff, but I've got a lot of I've got a few visual aids over here, some albums that kind of stick out, and I will show those when it's time to show those. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with my elementary school era. I've got a little checklist down here to make sure I don't miss some things. So yeah, the first music I can really remember listening to is Christmas music, really hearing that on the radio and then like in the mall and stuff. I actually have this, it's very nostalgic for me, is this Charlie Brown. I just grew up watching this, and just the good jazz music coming out of it, and just brings me back like crazy. And yeah, I was also would just hear stuff like Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Brenda Lee, all those people, and just hearing that stuff is probably the most nostalgic thing for me in my life. And I always try to listen to music almost every year, and it just brings me back to that comforting and warm time. I know that everybody had that around the holidays, or has had that around the holidays in their life, but it's always been a special time for me, and my family made it very special for me, and still grateful for it to this day, and I'll probably try to continue that in the future if I have kids. And yeah, but other than that, I remember listening to a lot of country, like early 2000s and like late 90s country music that my mom would play on the local radio station in the car. I grew up right outside of Richmond, Virginia, so it's still considered the South, so a lot of country influence around here, just from the roots and stuff. You can hear I've got somewhat of an accent. They call it the Mechanicsville accent. It's kind of like a fake country accent, but it's just what I grew up with. I just talk this way. I didn't really realize it as much until really I started making these videos, and I met Hannah, and she kind of pointed it out to me. But yeah, there's nothing I can really do about it now. Maybe it'll change again in the future, but yeah, that's what I have. But when I started getting into more the specific names I can remember, it was probably in elementary school, and usually kind of like around third grade is kind of when I remember started listening to a lot of stuff. My dad kind of getting me more into things. He would listen to stuff on the computer. I remember him like downloading stuff from Rhapsody, and then I got like really hooked on iTunes and stuff, especially when I got an iPod when I was in like 4th grade. So I remember my dad burning discs and just having various stuff on discs. I remember on the computer him playing like Coldplay's Clocks and Gary Newman's The Cars, and like Third Eye Blind, the Never Let You Go song, and just lots of stuff like that. And kind of intrigued me, and that's really nostalgic sound to me. But some big albums I remember, I never really listened to full albums much. It was just like a lot of different songs from albums like this. But one that really sticks out, my dad showed me, was Metallica and Justice for All. Just like songs like Blackened, One, Shortest Straw, Harvester of Sorrow, just that sound really intrigued me, and it's like I started with metal music at such a young age, and it really pulled me in, and I still absolutely love this album to this day, and especially now, like really listening to it, and it never really gets old to me. And another thing I remember listening to was a lot of stuff off of this Beastie Boys, their first album. My dad was really into them, and when stuff was coming out, especially in Metallica as well. But yeah, this kind of was my first introduction to hip hop, really, and those are still kind of what I love the most today. I love metal music and I love hip hop music, and it was just cool that I learned about those from such a young age, and I'm really grateful for my dad for showing me some great music when I was young. But as for finding stuff on my own, I guess another band my dad did show me was like Foo Fighters. Got them on my shirt here. Very nostalgic sound to me too, and I really just was listening to like the greatest hits, like Learn to Fly, Everlong, yeah, stuff like that. And I really like that band. I always wanted to see them live with my dad. Unfortunately, Taylor passed away obviously this past year, and don't know what the future of the band is going to be. So yeah, but like I was saying before, when I started really finding stuff on my own that my parents weren't really getting me into, it kind of started with stuff like, it really started with the Tony Hawk video games. I actually have an old case here. That's the Tony Hawk's Project 8. I was really into this, and I still love the soundtrack on this album. I know people really praise the Pro Skater albums and their track lists and stuff, but this and the one before it, American Wasteland, was really when I was getting into these games, and this music on this just helped shape what I love today. Hardcore punk, metal, some metal music, just some nitty-gritty like classic rock and jazz stuff put in there, and hip-hop. I just going back and listening to this stuff and finding stuff that I used to listen to and hear, it's just like blows my mind, and I still love it. And other than that, I definitely was listening to Green Day a lot. This album in particular, this really reminds me of when I was in like 3rd grade. I remember getting this at the store and listening to it in the car. But my dad kind of listened to some of this, but not too much. But obviously, the stuff that sticks out the most is like American Idiot, Holiday, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Wake Me Up When September Ends. But this whole album just very coherent, and I really like it. It just really sticks out, very nostalgic for me. And we also have All American Rejects is Move Along. I love that too. That was definitely got that on my iPod when I first had it. And 3 Days Grace. And this is probably another really big band I was into, is Disturbed, especially this album, 10,000 Fists. Yeah, those still really like stuff like that. I think the song Land of Confusion on the album, the cover from Genesis, was really what got me into watching that music video. My dad kind of got me into that too. And then this was more towards 5th grade. I was getting really into skateboarding and hanging out with some interesting people. And it was System of a Down, Toxicity, all of their albums I really got into. I got really into them, and it was hard to try to maneuver around the more explicit lyrics, I guess, because my dad was really strange about explicit and profanity, as he said. And it was hard. He always wanted me to have like clean versions of music, and trying to find those things on the internet, and it was always interesting. I remember one time we were looking it up, like how the song Sugar that was on their first album, and we were trying to find out a way to get it online, and it popped up because the music video has like women stripping and stuff in it, and they came up with like just like porn and stuff on the internet, and my friend and I were like standing back, like giving each other the eye, like, oh, my dad's sitting on here looking at porn, trying to find something for me, and just like that was just something memorable for me. A lot of music happened in that room that was above the garage of my parents' house, and we had the desktop computer in there, and just researching and looking at music, and porn sometimes too when I got older. All right, what's next? Let's move more into the middle school days. Um, Sixth grade, I was kind of just, I think I was still kind of listening to some of that stuff from my iPod, but then there was this one kid I started hanging out with, and he got me into like more metalcore and screamo stuff, which is like the Devils Wear Prada really sticks out to me. And I know my other friend that I was really hanging out with that time were like, what the hell are you listening to? What is this shit? But I really enjoyed it, and yeah, and it's kind of interesting going back to that stuff today. Like, um, I still like the sound a lot, but yeah, that was an interesting time. But I was also hearing some of like a lot of the mainstream music. Um, a lot of like the hip hop started coming in around that time. I started getting into more mainstream hip hop at that time, like T.I., Soulja Boy, and stuff like that. And then, because I was like on the radio and radio hits and just stuff I was hearing around. But then I started getting into, in seventh grade, it was more of like Lil Wayne and Eminem and stuff like that. I was getting more into that, and my friend would help me download the songs for free on the internet. And um, yeah, I remember making playlists and stuff and listening to that all the time. And yeah, I guess a little bit back in sixth grade too, or I guess it may have been a little bit later. I got into Michael Jackson as he died around that time when I was in middle school, 2009. And hadn't really, I mean, I'd heard some of his music in the past, but I really started getting entranced by his music, and I thought it was really cool, and it still sticks to me to this day. I still really love his music. I don't know anybody that could hate his music. And but yeah, then later in middle school, eighth grade, and this whole time I was really into skateboarding. I was making skateboarding videos on YouTube, and I got my Xbox 360, started playing this game. I started playing the skate games, and had all three of them. But I liked the music off of those soundtracks too, and that's when I kind of found like David Bowie and Nirvana and stuff for the first little bits of that. But I didn't really get into either one too hardcore at that time. But yeah, and another notable thing about middle school is when I had my iPod and stuff. I had my iPod Touch, and Kanye West. I was definitely listening to Kanye West a lot, and 808 and Heartbreak really, and Graduation. A lot of those albums brought me back to that time as well. And I was also into when in eighth grade. I was more into like some like indie stuff like Cardigans and Arcade Fire and stuff like that. And yeah, so that's what kind of ended out. Oh, MGMT, that sticks out too. That was my first little bit of hearing MGMT, which I really got into later, which I'll talk about later. Yeah, just like their basic hits like Kids and Time to Pretend and Electric Feel, and yeah. All right, so we're gonna move on to high school. High school, I remember freshman year, I really got more into just hip hop, and that was basically what I listened to freshman, sophomore year in high school, was just strictly hip hop. And I was listening, I remember freshman year, it was mostly like, I remember getting into like Wiz Khalifa and Mac Miller, because I was turning into a pothead. I was stoning up with my friends all the time and finding drugs and stuff, and they were obviously rapping about stuff like that all the time. And like Rick Ross and Drake and stuff around that time too. Then I started, 10th grade, I finally started opening my mind a little bit more about different weirder stuff in hip hop, which is like Odd Future and ASAP and like stuff like that. I don't think ASAP's really that out there. He's a little different than some, but it was hard for me to get into like Odd Future at first, and I got really hardcore into them. And then going into my junior year, I was really hooked on Joey Badass and his first two mixtapes. And that was basically what I was listening to at the beginning of that school year. But then finally, by the end of that school year, I started opening my mind again to more broad areas of music. It's that's area where I was just listening to hip hop is just like weird to me. Like, how did I completely just ignore everything else around that time? And I didn't want my rock roots to be there. I didn't. Oh, I was listening to hip hop because that's the cool thing to listen to, and I didn't want people judging me and shit. I think my self-esteem got pretty destroyed when I was in middle school, so that's kind of what led me up to that. But yeah, I remember there was this movie Drive um, that came out, and I was listening to that, or I was watching it with my friend, and there's songs on there just like kind of this like synthy feel. It's like 80s synthy feel, and it just kind of like entranced me. And there was like the song by Desire, which is an album I really love. It's from 2009. Um, there's a song called Under Your Spell, and oh my god, I just absolutely love that song, and it's one of my favorite songs of all time. And it just relaxed me and just took me somewhere I don't even know. But and then there was a song called Real Hero. That was by College and Electric Youth. That was on that movie too, and I was really started listening to those songs a lot. I had them on my download app on my iPhone. But yeah, when I really started opening up more after that was I started listening, getting back into more classic rock that I wasn't really as familiar with yet, and that was like Led Zeppelin and The Doors and Pink Floyd, and I kind of went along with my stoner regimen still, and party lifestyle, I guess, in a way. And then I really found Nirvana, and I was hooked. And that pulls roots back to this band. It was like, Dave Grohl was the drummer of Nirvana. I didn't even know that. I was into the Foo Fighters before that, and I was like, holy shit, like, that was a cool little world I didn't know about. And then I got just entranced by Kurt Cobain and just doing so much research on him and listening to all their music. I still got tons of box sets and stuff by them. Probably the most obsessed I've ever been with a band. I just absolutely loved their sound, and it was really bringing me back to like that. I remember hearing stuff like it when I was very young in the late 90s and stuff. And but I really got I'll talk about that later, about how his influences, I started listening to his influences of Kurt Cobain a lot, and that really interests me too. And that's actually coming up in the next section, which is when I got out of high school. I was in college. I did community college for a year, and I was kind of over it and just didn't go back. But I was working at Panera Bread at the time, and I just wanted to work really and have free time after work and not have to worry about school. And but during that time, I really remember listening to. I was starting to go to the gym a lot more and start lifting weights and stuff, so I getting more interested in that. And I was listening to more metal music. I started getting back into metal. Like, I was going back to like Slipknot. I listened to Slipknot some when I was young, but I got really into it again. And then like stuff like Sepultura, Lamb of God, Nail Bomb, which is Sepultura, the side project. And yeah, I was really into stuff like that. I started getting like the 90s metal music and Pantera and all those bands. And yeah, that was an interesting time. It was like really hyped me up in the gym. And yeah, but then like after that, I was still Panera. It was probably around 2017 now. I really got into MGMT again, and I started listening to all their albums, so I had never listened to Radically Spectacular all the way through, and then I got into Congratulations, and even got to their like mixtape before all this stuff. I listened to their third album, which is their self-titled. It was very strange and out there, and I would have not have been open-minded to that back in the day, especially not in like high school or anything when it came out. But yeah, that really pulled me in. And other than that, I was really started getting into, like I said, Kurt Cobain's influences. And two bands that really stuck out to me that I really got into were Sonic Youth and Pixies. And Pixies Surfer Rosa is definitely still my favorite by them, and I really got into that album. I was listening to it all the time. I was just pulled in by this. It was strange, and I don't know, just was really getting into that. And then Sonic Youth is strange as well. It was experimental music. I'd never really been into noise rock or anything, and it was just like pulled me in hard. I just still love that stuff to this day. It'll always remind me of that time in my life, and that's what I love so much about music. It's just, it'll always bring you back to the time you first heard this, and you'll always be hearing new music if you're wanting to, and it'll always remind you of a certain era in your life. Always have memories attached to it. It's crazy how hard those memories you can hold on to it just listening to one song off of an album you used to listen to, and just you're right back there. It's really incredible. Yeah, after Panera, I mean, I'm kind of counting by the years now because I've really started getting into music since then, and so really when I started getting into collecting, I was definitely buying some CDs and stuff when I was at Panera, but I really wanted to start getting into collecting music around 2018, 2019, and 2018, I don't remember too much from that year. I remember getting into like Alice in Chains during that summer, and I don't remember too much from the beginning, I guess I would say. MGMT dropped an album at the beginning of that year, Little Dark Age. I was pretty hooked on that, and I started getting into more synth pop and stuff like that because of that album. But I remember during the summer getting into Alice in Chains, especially their self-titled, and I really got into them. I wasn't listening to them before with how I was into Nirvana so much, and just didn't really pay attention too much to the other grunge bands. And then I kind of listened to Stone Temple Pilots, their first album. I was really into them, and other than that, I was getting into 3 6 Mafia and that whole like Memphis horrorcore scene. I was really hooked in by that because I've always loved like creepy Halloween horror stuff, and that just really pulled me in. And I think that's another reason why I like metal music so much. Yeah, then later in that year, I remember getting into the Smiths hard. I was really into the Smiths, especially their first 2 albums. And I remember just sitting, I was like revisiting old video games. I was playing like Call of Duty, the games I used to play in high school. And I was just sitting there playing and listening to these albums and exploring new music. And it'll always bring me back to that time, like the fall time. I just love the fall time, and those albums always bring that special feel back to me. Then other than that, I remember there's this album, Ariana Grande released this in 2018. And it really is what opened my mind to more mainstream music again, because I was just like not listening to mainstream music for the most part for a few years there. And yeah, I really liked this album when it came out, and kind of pulled me back in, and I was like, oh, okay, some new music is pretty good. I can't just ignore it. And so that's kind of what pushed me back into that. That's why I showed this album, because that was kind of a big turning point for me as well. But also around that time, I started listening to this Death, Symbolic, and I really listened to like their whole discography, and I was like, holy shit. But this really is what got me into more extreme and heavy metal music that I was like, kind of scared of digging into before. Just like the vocals and stuff, that's always what scares people away, and that's what scared me away from the first 2. But this really just pulled me in hard, and I'm really grateful to this band for really getting me into that. And then I turned into a hardcore metalhead for like at least 6 months. And another album during that time was that fall of 2018, was Burzum, Philosophum. I will forever be grateful to this album, probably even more than that album, because this got me into probably my favorite music genre of all time, is what I can call it right now, is black metal, atmospheric black metal. I was going through kind of a hard time transitioning to my new job, and just feeling inadequate versus my old job, and my escape was going on walks through the forest, listening to black metal music, and it just brought me just this calm but also brought me confidence and made me feel better about myself in those times. And I just absolutely just I'm so grateful for that. And I've really gotten more back into black metal music, which I'll get into. Yeah, I was tired of being scared of certain genres of music, and being open-minded is so important when it comes to music. For me, it's just I saw my closed-minded days and how much I was missing out on so many different types of music, and I just couldn't believe it, and I just will never be that way again. There's just so much out there that is to offer. I'm gonna butt in here a little bit, but I also wanted to mention at this time how I was this late 2018 into early 2019. I really got into listening to the album Around the Fur by Deftones. I remember listening to that a lot on these rides. I was going out and hanging out with one of my friends from high school a lot around that time. And yeah, that just one just sticks out to me too, so back to the video. But I was also listening to a bit of like modern pop music like Ariana Grande and Billie Eilish, and then like towards the end of 2019, I was getting into like Charli XCX and like Tuflo, but Charli really pulled me in. It's just like this experimental take on pop music, and this hyper pop sound is just like really insane, and I'm starting to dig into that more, and I'm really excited to hear more from stuff like that, like by Arca and Sophie. That sound is really cool to me. And also remember around 2019, about summertime, still going through a bit of a hard time, just emotionally. I was lonely, didn't have anybody in my life really, it felt like, but I don't want to make this a sob story, but I just want to tell you the truth of the matter. But I started getting into more emo, screamo music, especially Thursday and Old Pride by Pianos Become the Teeth. These two albums really got me pulled back into that, and I was really listening to these a lot. And I was playing Skate 3, the game Skate 3 a lot, and making skate parks and stuff. So it was just kind of bringing me back to when I was a kid, and yeah, emotional time, but also emotional music. And that's why I've always held on to. I've been a pretty emotional person my whole life. I've always been sensitive to a lot of things, and music is such a good way of people expressing themselves, and I love the highly emotional music. That just means something to me. It always hits me deep down, and that's what always hits the hardest for me. Yeah, and then I was listening a little bit at that time. I was getting into music reviewer, The Needle Drop, Anthony Fantano. I'm sure everybody knows about him. Probably the most famous music critic there is, but he really pulled me in, just like some of his obscure tastes and what he really liked and what he thought were incredible albums. And I became a bit of a fanboy a little bit later down the line, I'm not gonna lie, and I still look to him a lot for music reviews and finding stuff that's underground. But yeah, I started getting into, it was hard for me to get into it. I didn't really get into it until a little bit later, but some Death Grips, The Money Store, which is obviously was infamous, or a famous review of his, which is his first 10 out of 10 perfect album. And I do believe this is a perfect album now, but it was hard for me to get into it. I really remember trying to get into it at that time. It took me a while. It took me like years to really get into it. And then it really just clicked with me one day later on, like really last year, 2021. And I got really hard into them. I got really hard into more experimental hip-hop music, but I'll kind of come back around to that in a minute. Try not to get too confusing here, but yeah, also early 2020, I was listening to, let's get into like Joy Division, and this is around the time I started really collecting records, and you can see where that went. I started buying a shit ton and spending all my money on them, but that's okay. I love having all of them, but yeah, I was really into Joy Division and Iggy Pop and stuff, and I was looking at the influence of Ian Curtis at that time, and David Bowie and other synth pop and stuff, and yeah, I was really into that, and I started collecting that stuff on vinyl, and I remember I was working on this painting project for work. I had to paint the whole interior of the house, and I remember at that time I started getting into Bob Dylan and like Howlin' Wolf and stuff like that, and I was really pretty pulled in by his storytelling and his music, and so yeah, I was really into Bob Dylan at that time, and I was listening to Patsy Cline and then Tyler the Creator's album Igor that came out the year before, so a little bit of a varied music taste right there, but yeah, then when I really started collecting records, I started getting into punk again, really, and like Dead Kennedys, Buzzcocks, stuff like that, and then towards the end of that year, like August around this time, about 2 years ago, that's when these albums came in. It's David Bowie, so three David Bowie albums, is Low and Heroes and Scary Monsters. I was listening to these religiously, like almost every night. I got them on vinyl, and I wanted to find, these are all original pressings. I was like, need to find the original pressings, and I just was hooked on them, and I was listening to them all the time. It took me a while to get into some of these albums, like Heroes especially. Like I was like, what? Like, it was just different than anything I really heard with that style of music. I still really love those albums, and they'll always remind me of that time. And yeah, and just was really in just listening to records. I was listening to 3 albums a night usually. It's time for, and those are the 3 albums I went to a lot. And yeah, but towards the later that year, I moved out of my parents' house, moved to a little small apartment out in a rural area, and was alone, and I was listening to, it was like almost 40-minute ride to work from there. I really wanted to be on the country, but I was listening to Kid A or Radiohead a lot. I don't know what kind of pulled me into listening to this, but I started listening to it a lot, and I was listening to that almost every day on my way to work when I was living in that place. And that's when I started talking to my girlfriend Hannah, and that's when we met each other, and she really introduced me. I had heard of it before, never really listened to it. That was the Postal Service, Give Up. This is such a special album to me now. I can't believe the emotional hold I have on this album now, and the connection I have with Hannah over this album. But this shaped the beginning of our relationship. We bonded over this album extremely hard, and it's a perfect album. I'm planning on maybe doing a video about albums I believe could be perfect. I might record that sometime soon, I hope, but yeah. So that's definitely, these 2 albums definitely stick out special to me during that time. And other than that, she started getting me into, like, she really loves Taylor Swift, so I started listening to like Folklore. I'd been intrigued by it earlier in the year when it came out, especially because like the cover looks like a black metal cover. But yeah, that, and then Evermore came out at the end of that year, and we were listening to that a lot, and I enjoyed it. I enjoy her music, and even though I've listened to a lot of obscure, extreme music, I still love a lot of pop and mainstream music, and yeah. And then there's the band Bleachers too, that she got me into, the indie pop. Jack Antonoff, who works with Taylor Swift and stuff a lot, producing. Yeah, but then the early beginning of last year, I was kind of digging more into the back catalog of the Needle Drop on Anthony Fantano, and I was looking into his classic reviews, and it kind of opened my mind a bit more to like Nine Inch Nails and My Bloody Valentine and Portishead and stuff. I really got into some of those albums as well around that time, and I probably would maybe eventually have gotten into them, but I'm happy that he had that platform and he put that down, that he'd done those in the past, and Um, yeah, and then I really got into Death Grips in that year, last year, about mid-year, and like Modest Mouse and stuff like that. Um, Halsey released an album that was with Trent Reznor and Atticus Finch last year, and that kind of pulled me into. Hannah and I were on a big trip around this week last year, and we were listening to that album, so it always bring me back to that time too, and I was pretty impressed with it. But then getting more towards the end of the year, I started getting into Injury Reserve album. By the time I get to Phoenix, I actually have that here. I kind of want to pull it out now. This album right here, it took me a while to get into that album too, but I was still sticking with that. I was really into experimental hip hop, and this was taking it to like a different level. It was very different and out there than anything I've ever heard, and I got really hooked on it, and was happy to get a copy of it, and I'm excited to see them again. I talked about them in my hip hop record thing, so you can go back and listen to that too. But yeah, that, and then JPEG Mafia. I was I saw he was gonna be in DC, and I'm like, I need to get into him and go see him. So it was like a month before that, or like 2 months before he was gonna be in DC. I was just like listening to him almost every day, trying to listen to all his albums, and All My Heroes Are Cornballs is the one that sticks out the most to me, and then like his EPs and Veteran, and then the LP came out right before I went to see him, and it was like, exciting as hell. And then I went to see him, and it was probably the best concert I'd ever been to. Speaking of concerts, I don't know how I forgot to mention this, but the middle of the year last year, some Japanese Breakfast, Jubilees came out, and then this was the first concert I ever went to. She was at the National in downtown Richmond, and I had to start getting into shows. Hannah had been to shows in the past, and I really have gotten into them. Into shows, I've been loving seeing live music. I don't know how I never got them in the past, of how into music I've been into my whole life, but I'm just happy. I'm getting into them now and going to see them. So that was like the first concert that the National was showing post-COVID, so that was cool too. Other than that, I was getting into, like, at the very end of the year, some more hardcore punk. Like, there's Idols, the band Idols. I'm getting ready to go see them next month, which is exciting. I think I'm gonna be at the Anthem DC. And Injury Reserve is opening for them, which is incredible. I couldn't believe that. I was so excited when I saw that. But or bands from the 80s like Icons of Filth and Conflict I was listening to at that time. And I was really going to record stores a lot around this time, and I was finding stuff. And yeah, but other than that, early this year I got into Cocteau Twins really hard, and that reminds me of my new job that I started in December of last year. I was listening to Heaven in Las Vegas almost every morning on the way to work at the beginning there, and then I have since then still been digging into their catalog. They have their main 8 studio albums, and I love their music. I love their sound. I like their goth feel to their early stuff, and yeah, I got into like Mutilation and Human Serpent and like Deathspell Omega. I actually got into Deafheaven. It's usually a gateway into black metal. I kind of ignored it because people have always hate on them, but their Sunbather album's actually really incredible, and I think that's probably a near perfect album as well. Yeah, there's a band, Street Sax, was like this hardcore industrial, like punk album, and power electronics and stuff like that. And I really got into that. I've been getting into that, like just noise and hardcore experimental stuff. Just really is just like, wow, it just blows my mind. It just trances me, like Genocide Organ, Death in June's album, the Sacrifice album. That's just, that stuff just really just like, wow, like brain numbing, and just blows me away, really. And yeah, that's basically where I am now. It's my music journey as of now. I'll try to cut this video up a little bit so it's not insanely long, but I'm happy I got to share this video, and Tell me your thoughts down below. Any conversations? I love talking about music, obviously. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.